Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneurs Share Secrets with Sandra Mossman. Today I have a guest, Kate Dee. She attended Yale for college and medical school. She owns the MedSpa for the last 10 years, and she just wrote the book, MedSpa Mayhem.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Can you share your story, where you come from, and your education?
Yeah, well, I grew up actually in New York City. And as you said, I was at Yale for college and then medical school. And I did my residency out here in Seattle, which is where I've lived for 29 years now. And I was in radiology, breast imaging, and breast cancer for 16 years and pivoted about 10 years ago. I had been doing that for a long time and I loved my job, but I had two colleagues who were both OB-GYNs who had been doing aesthetics in their practice, and they encouraged me to check it out because it, was this happy thing that they did. And they were both retiring and wanted me to come visit their practice before they closed it. And I spent a day with them and it was just like really, really fun. And it was all medical procedures with needles, which I've been doing my whole career, but they were making people happy. And I can tell you, I really wasn't making people happy telling them they had breast cancer. I mean, I could get them through the diagnosis, but I just thought this is really a fun thing. And long story short, I did some training courses and tried my best to do it within my old practice. But basically my old partners kind of laughed at me and they didn't think I could do it. So I went out and put up a shingle 10 years ago and just did it on my own. And I'm really grateful that I did because, if I hadn't, I don't think I would have necessarily been nearly as successful being part of a radiology group as opposed to just, doing this on my own. Mm-hmm. And I've just learned a ton. I've made probably plenty of mistakes, but I've also happily made some really great decisions, and it's been a really fun ride.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about your story, how you started?
How I started the business?
Yeah.
Well, basically, that day after my partners turned me down, within 24 hours, I had leased a space in my neighborhood because where I live, Seattle has a lot of traffic. So commuting to my old hospital, that was sort of a pain. So my office is 5 minutes from my house. And I also got that same day my own malpractice insurance. And I, have my own little registered business. And in the beginning, it was me doing everything 24/7. I answered phones. I set up my own website on Wix. I researched spa software and started using one, and I set that all up. I did everything. And eventually, about a year and a half later, I hired my first employees, and we've grown to 2 locations. I think we have about 14 people total. Mm-hmm. And it's been really successful. And I hope that I've made a lot of patients happy. And I think my staff really pretty much enjoys our job. So it's nice to be able to create a living for people as well.
Mm-hmm. You told in our pre-interview that first you have a just small room when you rented, and then you decided to have a building. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Well, in that first space, I sublet a single room inside of a family practice. And I was there for not a very long period of time before I realized I really was going to need to find my own space. So one of the things this practice did was they saw about maybe 40% kids, and they would do injections in the next room over. And so kids were getting their shots and screaming and crying. And it's like trying to do, Botox and other things like that. And I was like, this is not going to fly. So I also, one of the things I did when I started was I basically went to every single business networking opportunity I could find. And in one of those, I met a commercial real estate agent, And I told him that I was looking around and I hadn't found anything. And he, about a week later emailed me like the perfect space. And so that's how I ended up finding the space I have. In, of course, my neighborhood, I know the area really, really well. I think that choosing the right location, if you're a brick and mortar kind of store or professional services place, you have to be in a good spot. And for where I am, I'm right in the middle of the kind of hub in the neighborhood, and I'm across the street from the post office, and I'm right in the area where there's a ton of foot traffic. And so we've been able to really benefit from having kind of high visibility on that location as well.
So we also talked that your decision to move to the space, it wasn't like financial, like when you started to make more money, but it was like just what's better for a client.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of all around. I mean, in learning that first year and a half about, what to offer and what people really wanted, what were the kind of services, I knew that it was going to be a lot more than just I could provide. I really needed to have at least one esthetician providing kind of esthetician level services. And I knew that ultimately I really wanted to have another, higher level provider, like a nurse practitioner or a PA who could help people when I wasn't there. I mean, obviously I can't be there all the time, right? And so I knew I would need a little bit bigger space. I didn't think I needed as much space as I ended up finding, but when I looked at that, and it was just the perfect location, and it really needed a giant remodel because it had been a law office, and there was no plumbing in it, and it was very dark. But I had people who told me, you know what, pretty soon you're going to be, bursting at the seams in this place. And they were right. Eventually that did, we do feel pretty tight now, but at the time, it felt really huge. But so we have 4 kind of big rooms, and then we have one kind of smaller room that doesn't have any plumbing, but we can do some things in there, and a little tiny office and a staff room and a kitchen and a laundry room. So it's big enough for everything that we need to do.
I see. Which services did you provide it in the beginning? What was yours? Like when you just work yourself?
In the beginning, I really chose things that I could afford to buy. So, I mean, I really had no money at all. I was in a lot of debt. And so I was offering injectables, which don't have a huge investment cost. So Botox and fillers and things like that. I also was offering PRP, which at the time was pretty new and was starting to really grow in popularity for cosmetic procedures. And I started to learn about skincare and skincare lines, and tried to offer some peels and some little things like that. But I found out very quickly that really is why I needed an esthetician. And then also what people really want, at least what I think people really want, is they want great skin, and they want to look a little younger than they are, and they want to feel great in their skin. And pretty quickly, I realized that meant I really needed a couple energy devices. And so I did get those really within the first year to do some skin tightening and skin resurfacing. Those were really, really important. And so for maybe in your audience who have never tried Botox or never had a laser treatment, I mean, basically, if you're doing it right, and I would say that we're doing it right, you are really trying to make your skin look fantastic. So you don't need makeup, and so you don't need those other things that like filler and stuff. So, I mean, I am 56. I have no filler in my face. I really focus on keeping my skin good. Right. And I think that, that approach is really, really well received by people. They want to be able to look normal and not weird. I think that the industry has gone quite astray in putting too much junk in people's faces and making them look weird. And I don't think people really want that.
But when people come to you and say, what, I want some big lips or like some kind of, I don't know, something, how do you tell them like it will not be good for you? Or you just, okay, you pay, it's fine.
No, so that's the thing. Most places, if you're willing to give them money, they'll do whatever you want them to do. And I think that that is just terrible. I really try to advise people what I think is the most helpful and the simplest, the most safe, the least expensive thing. I will say that lip filler is not evil, and that if you are losing volume in your lips, and that's very common. I would say most people lose volume in their lips as they get older. They get thinner and thinner. And I've had a lot of women who come in at my age who don't have much lip left. And they're like, I just want to be able to wear lipstick again. Yeah. And a little bit of filler that just plumps them a little bit looks great. And in that case, it's because you're putting volume back where they used to have it. Okay. So filler is fantastic, where if you've lost some volume, you can replace it and it looks great. Putting volume where it didn't used to be, or making things way bigger than they ever were, or even occur in nature, that's not my style. I don't do that to people. And occasionally, if I have somebody who comes in and says, I really want giant, Kylie Jenner lips, I'm like, well, I'm probably not your injector, because I don't, that's not my aesthetic. I will say though, Kylie does not do that anymore. She's been publicly not overfilling her lips anymore. And I'm hoping that trend is sort of on its way out, because it's, I think, weird. I think that whole ducky lip look is very, very strange. And I don't do that to people. Yeah. But I will say a lot of places work under a financial model where their injectors are paid more the more they inject in people. And so that is a huge incentive for them to take your money. So if you want something, they'll probably do it. You won't necessarily like the outcome, but they will pay, they ask for it, they'll pay. And I think that's a terrible, way to be. And obviously, I can't bring myself to ever do something like that, but that's, I would say, more than norm in the industry.
So when you open the MedSpa, you need some kind of education, for example, or like people who do the Botox, they just maybe do they have education? Like what do you see the industry trend right now? Well,
that is really a lot about what the book is about. So when I started, I did not have any idea how many people were doing this without any training, without really licenses. But the truth is, you're supposed to be. There are a lot of laws governing the practice of medicine. It's very highly regulated, actually, but it depends on voluntary compliance, meaning, most doctors and hospitals are licensed and certified, and they don't want to lose that licensure. And there's every reason in the world to be legally compliant. We don't ever want to be sued. We don't want to lose our license. We want to do good work, and we take an oath to help people only, never harm. So, but there's nobody coming to inspect a med spa. There's nobody checking that the people have licenses. There's nobody checking to see that the medical director is actually directing anything. So there are many, many places where there are people who maybe have a license but can't practice medicine on their own. That's very, very common. Like nurses are fantastic injectors, but they are not allowed to practice medicine. They have to have a medical director. Well, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And sometimes even when they do, they have a medical director who's on paper only, is not actually there ever. So, but then there are also a ton of illegal, unlicensed people, no license at all. They can't do this at all, but they're doing it. And how are they doing that? Well, you can order anything off the internet. So they can order fake Botox off the internet, and that's been in the news this year, the last few months, because all these people have gotten botulism from that. They can order, all the supplies. They can do all the stuff and be completely off the grid, off the radar. And they only get found out if they cause somebody to be very hurt or killed. And there was a case last summer of a lady who went to a med spa in Texas for an IV. A whole other discussion is why these places are offering intravenous treatments. But she got an IV and died instantly because the person who hung the IV did not know what they were doing. They had no license at all. They did have a medical director, but that guy was over 100 miles away in another city. And this person hung basically too much potassium, and that stops the heart. And so this lady died. So that actually brought a fair amount of attention in Texas. As far as I know, there may very well be a criminal case pending against that person and the doctor. As a result of that case, that doctor only lost their license for 3 months, and then they got reinstated. I don't know what happened to the lady who killed this person, but anyway, so the message of the book is kind of it's not all negative. There's a lot of positive too, because a lot of what we do is just amazing, right? And people really appreciate the benefits of just, having great skin, looking good at any age. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel good in your skin. It adds confidence. So there's a lot of good things. And I talk about a lot of that, but I do really delve into all the crazy illegal stuff going on. And as a consumer, I think I'm just really trying to educate people about like what questions to ask so that they don't, fall victim to these illegal places.
So who can open the med spa? Somebody who have a education, like what kind of education?
Well, yeah. So that's a really good question. The laws are different in every state about who can own it, and most states in the country have laws that ban the corporate practice of medicine, meaning businesses can't practice medicine and they can't own a medical practice. So there are these kind of legal loopholes that a lot of business people take called MSOs. They are management services organizations, and they're allowed to own a business that, say, owns the spa, the furniture, the computers. They can hire the front desk. They can own all the spa-like parts of it, but the medical practice where someone's getting paid to provide medical services, that has to be owned by a doctor. And so there are these kind of complex legal maneuvers you can do to own, the business person owns the MSO. They pay, or it should be the doctor collects money to provide the service and then pays the MSO to manage the spa for them. Those laws are, they work. But I will say that a lot of people don't comply with those. So a lot of these spas are illegally owned. The point is that the medical part, so the person, doing medical things to you is supposed to be legally licensed to do that and not influenced by a business person telling them what to do.
Is a med spa like good business, you would say?
It's a great business. I mean, I think that the reason that the illegal ones are popping up so much is because there's so much money to be made. I mean, if you do it legally, it's very, very expensive to run a med spa. For instance, let's just take Botox, right? The cost of Botox, if you buy it legally, you can only buy it from Allergan, and it's about $7 a unit just to buy it. Then you need to pay for all the syringes, the gauze, the alcohol, the needles, the little ice packs. Of course, you have to pay your overhead with this, your rent and your insurance, and then you have to pay someone to inject it. All of that costs a lot of money, right? I would say cost has to be at least $9 a unit, maybe more, kind of probably depends on your location. Okay. So how is a Groupon out there for $8 a unit? Okay, there's no physical way that that's going to work, right? So there's only so much business you could do losing $5 every unit. And typically a Botox treatment might be 20, 40, up to maybe 50 or 60 units. Well, that's a lot of money. So you can't lose that much money on every single patient that you're doing. So either they're using fake toxin, illegally imported toxin, or maybe they're watering it down, or, I mean, there's only so much you can do to have a loss leader like that. Right. So there are tons of people, cutting those corners. And in the news, there were 22 people reported in the news earlier this year who had botulism from fake Botox, because you can go to Alibaba or Amazon and order Botox directly, even though that's not legal, but you can do it. But it could be contaminated with anything, or it might have, the wrong amount in it. And in this case, the illegal Botox, that the one vial that has been going around that was in the news, NBC News published a picture of it. It was completely fake, but it had, in the end, too much Botox inside the vial. So it didn't measure right. And so people ended up getting way too much and getting very, very sick from that.
Yeah, regulations. Can you talk about your first equipment, what you bought, what you invested?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, I that first year, I bought a RF microneedling device, which it stimulates collagen and it kind of thickens the skin. I also bought a IPL machine, so intense pulse light, and that treats red things and brown spots. And between those things, those were, a lot of what people were coming in to ask for: skin tightening, and then also getting rid of their sunspots and red spots and things. And then very soon after that, I added laser resurfacing. And at that time, I also got into body sculpting, and that's like a whole other conversation. I would not encourage people to get into that now, but at the time, it was just starting and it was really innovative. It was just the first machines that actually worked for that. And I've been doing that very successfully for 10 years now. The whole other discussion about what's going on in body sculpting, I'm happy to talk about that. But those were the first machines I got. Other than the PRP, which just has a centrifuge for that.
Do you remember how much they were? What's the cost?
Oh boy, yeah. Well, every device I've purchased has gotten more and more expensive. I think the cheapest thing I bought originally was that first IPL, which I think was under $40,000 at the time. The RF microneedling, if I recall, was under $150,000. I can't remember the price exactly. Over the years, things have gotten more and more expensive. The most recent one cost me $250,000, and that was with supposedly $100,000 discount, because I was an early adopter of that. But I will say that I took out a $500,000 home equity line of credit on my house, this house that I'm sitting in, and 2 equipment loans that probably amounted to another $300,000. So I was very, very, very heavily in debt when I first started. It's a very, very scary endeavor to be buying these expensive things and not really knowing if they're going to ever pay for themselves.
Was it worth it to buy them?
Oh yeah. I mean, I made some really good decisions early on as far as which machines to buy. My 3 principles for buying a machine are: 1, it has to be effective at what it does. It has to work. Okay. It has to be physiologically, scientifically sound, meaning it has to make sense from a physiology point of view. And without getting into medicine and physiology, basically some of the machines that are sold out there, that are purchased, that are sold to people, the services that are sold to people, literally make no sense from a doctor's point of view. I'm like, why would anyone do that? I don't know. But so it had to really make sense. And so it had to also be safe. Because in my opinion, nothing in aesthetics is worth any permanent harm. Okay. Nothing. So, so it had to be safe. And then the third thing is it had to make economic sense, both from my point of view, but from the patient's point of view. So if I looked at it and I thought, well, I wouldn't pay that kind of money for that kind of treatment. I wouldn't buy it because I mean, I can't turn around and try to convince someone else to do something that I personally think is probably not worth it. So, so those three things were really, really important to me. And I think that as a physician, I've been able to balance the business decision with the medical decision and make sure that both of those things were held to the highest standard so that I made the right decision on both fronts. Because if you make a really great medical decision, but from a business decision, it's dumb, you'll be in the hole. Like there's a whole bunch of people who have a particular machine that I love the machine but it treats incontinence. And we just don't have those patients walking in the door saying, hey, you're a MedSpa, can you treat my incontinence? And it's a great machine and it works, but we just don't have those patients. And we also don't get referred patients from a urologist who might be treating someone's incontinence. So I was like, I'm never going to buy that. It makes no sense. But, people are out there buying things that, might work, but then you're never going to be able to pay that machine off, So unless they have a different kind of practice, if you're an OB, say you're an OB-GYN and you've got an aesthetics arm, which a lot of OBs do, then having that machine might make sense, right? Because they have those patients. But for me, it's like, no, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay. So how did your business grow after 1.5 years? So you got your building.
Right. It was pretty pathetic for that first year and a half. I was really just starting and learning. And I had a little trickle. It was okay. I didn't pay myself at all. And then, but once I opened my current location and hired my first employees, it very quickly grew just organically. I really didn't do I didn't do Google ads. I didn't do Facebook ads. We focused on like really good customer service and really good medical service. That's basically all we did. And we grew by word of mouth. And we pretty quickly got to, maybe $1 million a year in revenue. And it's grown to be, much bigger than that, since then. But in the very beginning, all I really wanted to do was make what I used to make when I was at the breast center. And it took me a couple years. Well, it took me 1.5 years to start paying myself. Maybe a little more than that. Close to 2 years. And then once I started paying myself, within a couple years, I was really able to, pay myself what I used to make. But my number one goal at the time was to create benefits. So when I first started, I literally had no money. I really was nervous about paying employees, but I told them that as soon as I possibly could, as soon as I had the money, we would have health insurance and ultimately a 401k. And I did that within the first couple of years, health insurance, dental, 401k, I have an educational allowance. It was really important for me to be a really good job, like to really have people feel like, all right, this is a place I can stay.
We will get to the team yours. First, I want to ask you about what kind of people you hired first. Did you hire assistant, like financial person, or you just hired the people who will help you with the business, like assist, like with the clients?
I did all the business stuff for a very long time. The first people I hired 3 master estheticians. Okay. All of whom wanted to work part-time. So they were able to I always had someone there, but they were able to rotate around. And so they were able to do facials and peels and microdermabrasion and dermaplaning, all those things. But then also in Washington State, and this is one of the few states that allow this, estheticians can do a master's program and get a special license that allows them to do lasers and some other medical procedures. So all three of my master estheticians had that certification, so they could do the IPL when I had that. And as I've grown, they've done some of the things. They did body sculpting as well. And then within a few months of hiring them, I had to hire people for the front desk because our phone really started to ring. In the very, very beginning, it was just like whoever was free would answer the phone. But very quickly we realized, okay, we're going to be in rooms taking care of patients and we need somebody at the front desk. So that was the next thing. And then I really, it took me years before I finally hired a business manager. And that was really, really difficult because there were so few people who, that they had those kinds of skills, both on the business side and on the customer service side. And in the medical spa, it is such a really interesting balance between medicine, business, and customer service. People are coming and spending a lot of their own money on things that they expect to have results. And so it's very much like, how do we take care of you? How do we do the best we can for you? So it took a while to find somebody who is ideal for that. And luckily I do have a really amazing business manager. I hope she, wants to stay with me for as long as possible. She's been fantastic.
What does she do? How she helps you?
Well, she started at the front desk. So I hired her at the front desk. She's been with me 4 years now, but I hired her with the intention of training her to do, the managerial stuff over time, because she was interested in that. And I thought she was a good candidate. But she had to learn the business first. She knew nothing about the business, and she was young too. She was in her late 20s at the time. And so first she learned the business and the front desk. She had worked at Nordstrom, so she knew about customer service, which is great. And then over time, I've just taught her, slowly, how to do the managing people is the hardest thing. Payroll and all the benefits and, doing marketing, social media, marketing, our monthly specials, pricing, even just managing the website.
I see.
There's just so many things.
Yeah.
There's still a lot more that I manage personally that she hasn't taken over. When you are a solo owner of a business, especially if it's something complicated like a med spa, there's so many aspects to it that almost I don't even think about it sometimes until something comes up and like, oh, right, I have to renew the malpractice insurance. And that involves not just a whole application every year, but you have to analyze all your numbers and report them. And I don't know how accurate other people are, but I'm pretty accurate. So we delve into the system and look, at how many of this we've done and how many of that and whatever. And so that's like a whole good week's worth of work just to get that done. And that's just one tiny little thing of the whole giant practice.
So tell me about your team. How did you hire them? How your practice with them is?
Well, that's been, that's really evolved. So I started out with 3 master estheticians. One did not work out so well, so I ended up letting her go after the first year. The other 2 were with me both until they just retired, both of them. One just a couple months ago and the other last year. And after that, I hired basically other injectors. So I did hire an RN early on who I hired before I really understood all the law. And one of the things I learned after I hired her, a few months later, I went to a meeting of the American Medical Spa Association. It was their very first meeting. and they're very focused on legal compliance. So I'm at this lecture and I learned that RNs are not allowed to practice on their own, and they're not allowed to see new patients. I mean, they could see a new patient, but they cannot do the consultation, the good faith exam, do an assessment and plan. I have to do that, or a nurse practitioner or PA can do that. Those are mid-level practitioners. But RNs are not allowed to do that. RNs can really only carry out a doctor's orders or an order, from a PA or an NP. Well, I didn't know this. Okay. And this particular RN had been working for a dermatology group and seeing new patients on her own for years. And that wasn't legal either, but she was very unhappy when I came back from this meeting and said, we have to change our workflow. And I was like, I didn't realize this wasn't legal. I have to see them first, blah, blah, blah. And she was not willing to comply with that. She really didn't think that that was necessary. And I'm like, well, just because you've been doing it doesn't mean it was legal. And I just can't. So we had a little disagreement and we parted ways over that. So since then, I've really basically tried to hire only a nurse practitioner or PA, because I do think it's important as a provider of these services to do the consultation. You get to know the patient, you bond with them, they believe in you, you start forming this relationship. And I think that's really, really critical to, being a success in the industry. So I really wanted to have providers in my place where they could do that. Because I think it's really weird to go to a place, see someone, and then never see them again. And when you go to have the procedure, it's some other person who you've never met. It's, in my place, we're very collaborative. And if you've been seeing one of my providers, and they're away and you got to get in for your Botox or something, you're going to go to Hawaii, really want to get in before you go. My place, I think that people, hopefully anyway, trust us, and we're all a team. And so, we'll say, hey, you will love her. She's fantastic. Don't worry that you can't get in to see me. You will, and I do think there's a fair amount of crossover there, but that's built out of, trust over time. There are a lot of places where they do their initial consultation virtually, and actually they might very well have a virtual, a consultation with somebody who's not even at your spa. There's one chain of places that has a call center that really that just has salespeople at the call center, and they kind of portray it as though it were a consultation. And they prescribe something. And then when you go to your local place, it's someone you've never met. And actually, that person who did that initial thing was not even a licensed provider, even in your state. So that's really common out there. And it's terrible. I think it's terrible practice, but whatever. If you can probably figure out who that is if you.
Yeah, definitely. I liked how you talked about your bonuses, about your team, how it's of as life lessons you learned about it.
Oh yeah, that's good and bad. Okay, so I can tell the story about how I created this bonus. So as we were growing, I very much wanted to share the profits with my team, and I had I had set up a system where people could kind of work as much as they want to work. So if they want to work 3 days a week or 4 days a week, or if they wanted to take off 8 weeks of vacation or 4 weeks of vacation, they could. It's unpaid. If you take off 8 weeks, you're not getting paid, but it's this flexibility built in. And I felt like that was really important to create happiness for me. So I figured if it made me happy, then it would make other people happy. And so as we grew, I felt very much like these guys are really helping me build this business. And so when I had extra money, I wanted to bonus my staff. So I started doing that, and I did it monthly. I basically, the spa software I have calculates, kind of a ballpark revenue number that you can look at every day. And I based it on that number, even though that wasn't profit at all, right? That was revenue, but not profit. So, and the cost of things vary very much. So, and they're very high, but in any event, so I started bonusing people every month. And the amount of cash in the very beginning that was available for that kind of kept going up because we were growing. And we were growing. And so the amount of cash available for that was going up. And so these bonuses became, one, bigger, significant, and two, very frequent. So every month. So people were counting on that. Right. Mm-hmm. And what I hadn't accounted for is that you really can't base things on your cash flow because really, you have these giant expenses. For instance, the $250,000 machine I bought that take the cash away suddenly, right? And so you really have to look at your net income on your P&L, your profit and loss statement, and you have to look over a longer period of time to know whether that, that profit is stable. You're not about to buy another piece of equipment or have some other big cost. And because I'm a sole proprietor, just little old me, I pay income tax on that bottom line. And so if I grow a lot, I owe way more tax. And so in this one particular year, I had two things happen. We grew a lot, so my tax bill was extra huge. And I bought that $250,000 machine. And this caused a big shortage of cash, right? And so all of a sudden, my staff had their very first, bonus that was less or not. I can't really remember whether it didn't happen or it was delayed or it was less. And everybody was, one, upset, and two, what did I do wrong? And I had come to the staff and explain, like, hey, I'm sharing with them this bonus as I'm experiencing the cash flow. But this things go up and down. And just because we had been sort of riding this up thing, everybody felt like it was forever up. And I'm like, no, I'm sharing the profit. Sometimes profits go down. Yeah. And they took it like they were, losing something or not good enough or being punished or whatever. And I'm like, no, this has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with the fact. So I changed the bonus structure to quarterly. And actually one of those quarters is a traditional 401k profit sharing. So that's not calculated by me. So really it's 3 bonuses the rest of the year that I wait for my QuickBooks to be done. The one thing I did or outsource in the beginning was my bookkeeper because I really didn't want to do my own QuickBooks, which I highly recommend because that is such a pain. But anyway, so I wait for my bookkeeper to be done booking out QuickBooks for the quarter. And then I look at, taxes, I look at upcoming expenses, I look at all the cash, and then I bonus accordingly. So bonuses are not quite as big as they were at the very peak of that. And I really had to explain that to my staff because, people really come to depend on something when it's every month. And they really come to depend on something when it's always getting bigger. So and all of the logic in the world doesn't necessarily make them realize that, I'm just lucky to get this. I'm lucky to be on this ride. That's how I felt. And I think that, as a business owner, I'm sure you can understand, like, there's so many ups and downs. The moment you think you're ahead in one space, you're behind in another space. And it's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I was used to that. But the staff wasn't. And so it was a lot to get them on board and explain. And now that we've had some time, with the newer bonus system, I think it's pretty much settled out. People get it and they understand, and they're not expecting it, not depending on it for their big, purchases or financial planning, which is good.
So how do you create this teamwork, or how do you hire the talents? How you keep them? The bonus, one thing, maybe something else, what you worked for you.
Yeah, well, so having a great job on paper is one thing. So, as I mentioned, I have this very flexible work hours and vacation.
Mhm.
I pay really, really well. So, and I have good benefits. And so it's a great job, I think, compared
Mhm.
to many jobs. But traditionally, I've really used Indeed to hire actually front desk estheticians and injectors. I don't love Indeed. I think Indeed is really, really painful. It really, you get so much randomness on there, so
Mm.
many people applying who are not qualified at all. It's a lot of work to sort through all of that. I've definitely had amazing luck with some random connections. So, one of my newer, she's been with me over a year now, estheticians, literally dropped her resume off in person one day. And it was the most beautiful, professionally done resume I think I've ever seen, kind of bound in this little booklet thing. It was really, really phenomenal. And she's very young, but really incredibly smart. Um, and I just feel lucky to have found her. So right when my other esthetician was retiring a year ago, was she had just dropped her resume off like 3 weeks before, and I was like, I should talk to this girl. She looks amazing. And so that, is just sort of serendipity.
Mhm.
For my most recent hire, I hired a nurse practitioner, and I hadn't been having any luck with Indeed,
Mhm.
and I ended up hiring a recruiting firm
Oh.
that recruits injectors in the MedSpa space. I had no luck with them either. And eventually, back through Indeed, somebody inquired who was kind of amazing, but she lived in California. And I'm like, well,
Mm.
are you really moving here? And I interviewed her remotely, and my two PAs interviewed her remotely, and everybody liked her,
Mhm.
but she couldn't get up to Seattle for a couple, like 2 months. And she's like, oh,
Mm.
I realize, you can't hold the job for me. I'm like, well, let's set up an interview, and, I'll let you know if someone
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
comes along. No one else came along. And literally she came up for an interview that day, had just signed a lease in the neighborhood, assuming she was get the job, and just I'm all in, I'm coming, and I'm like, but we haven't even hired you yet, like, and she's just like, well, I just know it's gonna work out, and I'm moving here anyway, and blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay, but really, she did just such a great job, and everybody loved her, and she's been a phenomenal addition
Mhm.
to the staff. So that did end up working out, but it really took a long time. It took much of the year to find her, and it's hard because I really wanted to find somebody personable and smart and experienced and
Mhm.
qualified, and there are many 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 people wanting
Mhm.
to become an injector in
Mhm.
aesthetics, but
Mhm.
not very many people who are actually trained and do it well. So,
Mhm.
so that was definitely the longest search
Mhm.
that I've had. I mean, other than, with my manager, that I also hired her through Indeed.
Mhm.
But I had tried uh, two other times to hire a manager, almost three, kind of.
Mm. Mhm.
And it just didn't work out. Like there were people who it
Yeah.
just wasn't the right fit.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's can
Yeah.
be really, really
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. For hiring the right team, like it's so important for a business. It will contrive or it will be bad.
It's really critical. I think, well, that slogan, uh, hire slow, fire fast, or fire
Mhm.
fast,
Mhm.
hire slow. I
Yeah.
mean, that
Yeah.
is so true.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I mean, the moment you think this is not working, you
Mhm.
really should cut,
Mhm.
cut your losses. because having somebody who's toxic in some way, either not a good provider or not a good team player, doesn't care, that will just ruin your business. It's awful. It ruins morale. It decreases revenue. It's just terrible. So, and then finding the right person, you just have to take your time and it's just really, really challenging. But in my place, I've tried to maintain a culture where we all help each other. We all support each other. But that means that if the front desk is on the phone and somebody's waiting to check out and the phone rings on the second line, I answer it, or whoever's around answers it, right? We all help out, taking out the garbage or replacing the water, or whatever it is that needs to be done, putting away supplies. We all help each other and we all support each other. And I think that that's really, really critical. And that doesn't necessarily come naturally to people. And I think also people coming from a more traditional workplace where it's 9 to 5 and, set vacations and not that collaborative are not used to collaborating. But in my place, I think it's just critically important.
Yeah. So talk about your second location. When did you open your second location?
Oh, yeah. So, well, that is kind of also an interesting story. So I do not own or run the second location. So I met Dr. Otto back in, I guess, 2000, maybe 18. She is an OB-GYN and wanted to open up a medical spa in Kirkland, which is kind of the opposite end of the Puget Sound area here in Seattle. And she had been doing a bunch of research and meeting people. And one of the laser reps recommended that she talk to me. She said, "Oh, you should talk to Dr. Dee. She's already figured all this stuff out." And I had lunch with her a couple times and I was giving her a bunch of advice. And she's just a super nice person and really smart. And I was like, well, why reinvent the wheel? Like, if you can open up a glow here in Kirkland and you can just own it and run it, we would work out some kind of deal where she could use the name and then I would manage all the digital infrastructure, like the website, marketing, the spa software and all that. So that's what we did. We formed an agreement to do that. And she opened up at the end of 2019. Just in time for the pandemic. So for her, it's been a little bit more painful, slow launch. She's doing really well now, but it was a little slower. And I think that over on the east side of our area here is a very different market. It's a lot more saturated over there. But she's doing great. And so it's kind of interesting. People say, oh, it's like a franchise. It is not a franchise. Okay. She runs that. It's her thing. We do collaborate and we do offer almost all exactly the same services, but not 100%. And so we do, collaborate with each other, but I don't dictate what she does at all.
Would you like to open more locations like this one?
I've toyed with that. I think the hardest thing is finding a physician that could be present and run it or who wants to do that in a collaborative way. Dr. Otto, I think, was able to see, oh, this saves me a massive amount of work I wouldn't have to do. And it would cost her more because she'd be paying separately. So because she's part of a bigger system, her prices are better. There's a lot of economies of scale and a lot of, savings in having, especially older pricing, because I've been around for 10 years. So my pricing is a little better than if you were to start now. But finding a doctor who wants to do that, because I don't want to travel. I love being 5 minutes from my spa and I can be there in like 5 minutes for any reason. That's important to me. And I also feel very strongly that physician management, physician presence, someone who knows how to do it, what they're doing, how to manage complications is really important. And so that would require a very specific person to do. So I have not gone out and tried to find that person, but I'm not against it either. But I just think that I'm very particular about how that would look. And I don't think that I would want to be the medical director for some spa, way north or way south or something, because I don't think I could do that properly. And I don't think that is good medicine.
Yeah. Aligned with your values, about with your book too, what you're writing.
Yeah.
And
I wanted to say one more thing though, is that's all about money. And as I'm not saying money's bad. I'm not saying I don't like to, make money, but I am super not motivated by that. So I can make a lot more money if I open another place and I'm the sole owner and the sole medical director. I could do it. I don't want to, and I don't think that's the right thing to do, but I could. And that's what's happening out there all over the place, is whether it's a doctor or it's usually not. It's a non-medical person who there's a lot of money in this. I'm going to go, do that. And they're going to try to minimize their costs as much as possible, which means paying the minimum to a medical director, which I've heard quotes as low as $500 a month, to allow, a whole slew of people to practice under your license. So risky. I can't imagine taking that liability ever. But it's pretty common out there.
Yeah. And one more question, kind of last one, about your marketing. How you told in the beginning you did networking event. You went there to find the clients, and then how it's.
No, I didn't. I wasn't really looking for clients. I was really trying to learn about business, insurance, real estate, all of those other things. And sometimes referrals, maybe. I mean, if you get to know a business person, maybe they'll refer you. But I think that my referrals, if I get from another business person, usually that's from a stylist in a salon, or, other estheticians who do facials at other places, if you want Botox, you should go to Dr. Dee. We do get a fair amount of referrals from our local dermatologist here in our neighborhood for certain things where, that's cosmetic, you should go to Glow. But no, I was really looking to just learn as most I possibly could to figure out how to run the business. I think for marketing, so the number one thing for my business is having a really excellent website and SEO, so that when somebody, excuse me, when somebody moves to Seattle, we have a lot of people who move here to go work at Amazon. They Google best Botox in Seattle, and they'll find me, right? Yeah. I think that's really important. We do keep track of new patient referrals and where they came from. And overwhelmingly, there's two main things. One is referral from a friend. So about half of people are referred by their friend who already comes to us. And the other half is from a Google search. And they were looking for usually Botox or facials or laser hair removal. Or MedSpa near me or whatever. So we have to have a really accurate, informative website that people find everything they need to find and make it easy for them to book with that. So, basically all my marketing money goes into the website and SEO. I have really have never done any real advertising. One device I bought came with money for a Google ad, which I did a very limited thing for that. Big zero. It's just it costs a lot of money, and we didn't get any real patients from that. And I just think it's a big waste of money. I do think there's a big difference between the kind of marketing that we do, where we are looking to form a very long-term relationship with our patients. And so what they call client retention, That's our number one thing. If we take care of them and they're happy with our service, they'll come back. There are so many med spas that do a ton of advertising. You will see Google and Facebook splattered across your screen. And those places need, 100 or more new patients every month in order to feed the revenue. And that model is, these people are coming in for one thing. They're paying for it. They're probably not that happy because they're not coming back, because that generates the need for another 100 next month. If you're really good and you get 100 new people, it's a lot. Okay. And those people come back to you, then pretty quickly, you don't need that many new people. It's not that we're not going to need them. People move away. People do other things, or they get pregnant and they stop doing stuff. But even those people, eventually they come back, like, oh my God, my kid's 3 and look at me. But that model of a constant churn, I heard when I first started a quote of, you should spend 20% of your revenues on marketing. Well, that's enormous. I mean, I think my number is more like 2% or something. It's very low. And but you have to realize, if you're responding to an ad like that, that place is probably not going to be the best place, right? And it's a more of a churn, one and done, I'm out of here because I didn't really like it kind of.
So what would be your tips for everybody who want to start the med spa?
To start one? Well,
get licensed.
My lawyer would be happy if I said, go get a consult from a healthcare attorney first. So I would say, if you're a doctor, then all you need is training in how to do the procedures. And then I would highly recommend doing a little mini business MBA to learn about the business side, because it does not come naturally for most doctors. And to consult a healthcare attorney to make sure you're doing everything legally. But a doctor is the most likely person who is going to do it legally in the first place. If you're not a doctor, then you really need to see an attorney first. Because in most states, there are really complicated laws that govern this, and chances are you are going to fall into a hole. And if you open before you realize that you need to do something differently, then that's a lot of money gone because you didn't do it right in the first place. So in some states, a nurse practitioner can basically be treated like a doctor, and the nurse practitioner in an independent practice state that also allows prescribing, they can, similar advice to any doctor. But everybody else, you can't do it. You can't practice on your own. Nurses can't practice on their own. If you're an esthetician, you can't do that either. So just because you took a weekend course on how to inject Botox does not mean you can open a medical spa. That is not what these courses tell people. There are these courses that literally are like a 2-day course. And they'll teach almost anyone. And some of them promise even, we'll provide you a medical director, or we'll connect you with a medical director. It's just not legal to do that. You have to have, I learned just recently, I wrote a whole book about this, but I just learned a couple of days ago from my attorney that not only is the corporate practice of medicine, those laws apply in every state, but every state has a different law that governs what kind of business entity can own a medical practice. So in my state, I have an LLC and I'm a doctor, and I can own a medical practice. But if you're forming a business entity in California, say, you can have a professional corporation, I think, and that can own, but that's the only type of business entity that can own a medical practice. Whereas in Texas, a professional corporation cannot own a medical practice. It has to be one of 2 different business entities. So anyway, even the business entity really matters. And before you know it, you may end up, being way down the line with, a name. You have to make sure you're not violating someone's trademark. So your name, I'm constantly sending cease and desist letters to brand new places that call themselves Glow MediSpa, because I have the trademark for them.
Yeah.
Well, people don't even look it up. It's like, well, look it up. Don't pick that name before you know it. You're going to have a lawsuit lodged at you. Okay. And so your entity, your URL, your domain, your licensure, corporate practice of medicine. Do you need an MSO? Do you need a medical director? What does the medical director have to do? It's really complicated. So I that's my number one thing. And obviously I'm like up on my soapbox right now talking about that, but I really do think that there's kind of a reckoning coming in the industry because it's such an enormous industry right now. If you look at it, it's about a $20 billion industry and growing. So I do think that there's going to be a lot more regulation, especially as people, are dying in IV bars and getting botulism and infections and stuff. So,
yeah, yeah, it's difficult to get, I think, in MedSpa. To create the MedSpa, it's very difficult. You need to study so much and you can't just finish two-day courses.
You can't, right. Yeah.
No.
But it's hard if you're, say, an esthetician in Texas and you see an ad for the 2-day course. Yeah. And you're like, oh, that would be fun. And in Texas, actually, estheticians can legally inject if they're working under a doctor directly.
Again, yeah.
And the doctor supervises them.
Yeah.
But the esthetician sees the course, signs up, pays their money, goes to the thing. The people who run the course promise that they'll have like a new business when they're done. They don't know that it's not legal for them to do that. They have no idea, right? And they don't know that they need an MSO. They don't know that they need it. And they're sort of sold this package with this weekend course that they think is going to give them a whole new, profession. And, no, that's not okay. Especially, if you look at the amount of education and training a physician has to have, after college, it's 4 years of medical school and anywhere from, 3 to 12 years of residency training, board certification. Like it's a weekend course just does not cut it.
Yeah. And it's, so not fair to like for people who just finish the education and like somebody who just take 2 days. And it's not safe, of course, not safe.
Well, it's very much not safe. Yeah. I mean, the fairness, you could argue, well, you get what you pay for. So if you're a patient and you walk into a place that, somebody who's not trained and not certified and not licensed is running it, well, you could say, well, you took your chances, right? I hear a lot of people express that kind of sentiment. The one thing I will say about that is that most people, when they walk into a spa and it's a med spa, people are in scrubs, they think, well, this is the United States and all this is regulated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'd be wrong about that. Right. And nobody's inspecting. I can tell you that in the 10 years almost 10 years I've been open, we actually have a cosmetology license for the facials and the spa stuff, right? Dermaplaning. So we have a license for that. And the cosmetology board has been into my practice twice to inspect just the facial room. Okay. And they are looking at, are there covers on the little jar of sticks that people use, we use for waxing. We don't do waxing anymore, but we used to. Things like that. Are the little garbage cans covered, right? Is it clean? Is it whatever? But that's just for the facial room. So in the other 3 rooms, I have lasers that could blind people. I have PRP kits where we're doing bloodborne, we're handling people's blood. Nobody's inspecting that stuff. Nobody's, and I care because it's my license. So I'm making sure that we're safe. I'm making sure that we have laser safety stuff and all. But there's no one coming to inspect that. And so if you're a patient and you're going to a place like that where, an unlicensed person is doing all the stuff, you're very likely to trust that person because you think there's some kind of certification. Yeah. So I don't think it's 100% on the patient to, figure that out. But one of the reasons I wrote the book and at the end of each chapter, I list like, these are the questions you should ask before you go and have one of these treatments. So you can sort that out. And I'm very much hoping to change the way the system works so that that med spas will be, regulated and certified, and you'll be able to just look it up. I think that, I'm very hopeful that that will be in the near future.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. I hope so too. So thank you so much, Dr. Kate Dee, for the interview.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great talking with you.
I think it will be very helpful for everybody who want to maybe start a med spa, to maybe they're thinking to start a med spa. I think it's need to listen to this podcast to understand, like, do you have all the checkbox? Can you do it really?
Yeah. Or because it can be done, and it can be done really well. You don't have to be a doctor to do it really well. You just have to know, how to be legally compliant and how to be top notch from a medical point of view.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.